I'm sorry people at home, I was thinking of 1980. What happened with Kennedy is going to happen in the 70s, it's going to come out in 1980. That was what I got confused with. So Carter is elected, or nominated, and he wins a really narrow election versus Ford. It wasn't particularly lopsided. Many conservatives looking at between 68 all the way really until the year 2008, they saw this as a conservative domination. And the only reason why Carter got elected was because of Watergate and Ford's pardon, right? That Carter came in promising to be the anti-Washington. He was an outsider. He wasn't a Washington guy. He was a Southern governor. He wasn't an insider. And so Republicans saw this as a sort of a hiccup, right? Had it not been for Watergate and Ford pardoning Nixon, that Carter would have never been elected, and Republicans would have continued through Reagan and Bush, and Clinton was the only reason Clinton happened was because Perot ran and screwed over Bush. But certainly Republicans have argued that it should have been about a 30-year reign of Republicanism. What Democrats are hoping now is the tide is turning demographically. I don't know if it'll happen or not. Do what, Andrew?
It sounded awesome.
Yeah.
All right, we'll get back.
Yes, the 80s were the coolest. They were pretty nice.
You were not
Not even
Mr.
born,
Sad.
Mr. Sad.
Right, my parents told me about the 80s.
Yeah.
I was born in 1994.
So you're
Like
18.
a full measure.
I'm 19. Right. I wasn't actually able to, I couldn't grow this facial hair even in college. It's kind of embarrassing. This is also taking me like 3 weeks.
Oh, I'm weak.
Sir, I don't have your little mustache right here.
Oh, just wait till I was shaved about a month. I'll have more facial hair right here than you do on your whole face.
Good. That'll be hot right here. You look like a weird character from a Kurt Russell movie. All right.
Miles with the whole thing going.
I'm much in a strap.
I'd never done that in high school. I had like 9 hairs that would come out here and here in high school, and that was about it. It wasn't hot. It was hard to see through all the acne, to be fair. The acne covered up most of it all. Had acne on top of acne. Girls loved me. Okay, let's talk about Carter, all right? Let's talk about Carter's domestic policy. A couple things that he did that were a little more liberal. He did establish 2 new departments, 2 new cabinet posts. The Department of Energy, and the Department of Energy was to focus on America's energy issues, right? Domestic energy problems, harnessing of energy. All of these things were the charge of the Energy Department. The Energy Department today, the guy who just left, I forget his name, he was the highest ranking Asian American in the cabinet. What's his name? He used to be a professor, I think. He did a really good job. What he wanted to make the Energy Department was like moving towards alternative fuel sources and a lot of investigation and research on that. And they moved a little bit. But the original Department of Energy was because, remember, they had all these problems with OPEC and the problems with an unsustainable necessarily energy flow. And he also created the National or the Federal Department of Education. This has been very unpopular amongst conservatives, specifically small government conservatives, who've argued that states have to handle education, and anytime, because the Constitution doesn't mention it specifically, right? It's the 10th Amendment argument. And states handle their own education, and the federal government getting into it is just bureaucratically unnecessary. When Perry ran from Texas, he promised to get rid of the Department of Education if elected. And many conservatives have actually made that promise. If elected, they've never won.
I just feel like as a nation, don't we need some sort of like standard?
Well, and that's kind of what not only Carter but many presidents have argued, that this is providing funding, right, to states, is doling out funding. Others is providing national standards. that's what No Child Left Behind was supposed to be about. What Obama administration's done sort of differently is the head of education named Arnie Duncan, who played basketball at Harvard. It's neither here nor there. Although Obama tends to put people in power who are good at basketball.
That's how they work.
It must be. And they got rid of No Child Left Behind, and they did Race to the Top, where states that are progressive on certain issues get access to more money. So it's forcing states to behave in a way that they want them to, like incentivizing it. Ironically, that's actually more of a conservative way to do it than No Child Left Behind was, which was just sort of standards.
Was pretty liberal, really.
Do what?
I feel like No Child Left Behind is pretty progressive.
Well, it was the idea itself of a nationalized level it was written very poorly and it was funded stupidly. And it's also, because it was written poorly, success was defined kind of awkwardly. In fact, one of the best high schools in our country had a hard time meeting standards. Because you literally have to grow all the time or you're failing. And so schools that were awful, one thing happened, like for schools like us, our baseline scores, our principals, I wasn't here, and Mr. Woodrow wasn't here, but the principals were like, tell them to put whatever down. Our first CAT scores, remember we used to do CATs? Our first CAT scores were embarrassingly low. We did it on purpose. That way we could always look like we were growing over the years. So what happens?
That's pretty smart.
So what happens is, well, it's not smart because you're gaming the system, right? Instead of teaching kids better, we're giving out things like, finals exemptions and things. The reason we're doing that is to get you to try on the test, right? Half the students just didn't try. So it wasn't a matter of what you were teaching, it was a matter of how you were getting kids to behave on test day half the time.
People slept through the ACT when we took it.
Yeah, and to be fair to those people, they don't go to college. We're making them take a test that's embarrassing them because they don't know the answers. It's making them feel bad about themselves. And they don't have any plan on going to college. So why are they taking the ACT? Well, it's a norm reference test, but it hurts us because they're sleeping and so we're judged on that. Also, some kids, if they don't know the stuff, this is their way of showing defiance, right? That this is how they're not wanting to do it. I don't know. Carter also did something that was relatively liberal. He created something called Superfund. Superfund is still around. Superfund, we're having a lot of problem with chemical spills and our waterways and stuff being kind of contaminated. And Superfund is a government program to clean up our natural waterways and our natural environment. There's one more thing on the liberal side. Make sure I don't forget. And then one more conservative thing he did during his administration was he deregulated the airlines. The airlines were highly regulated. Leah, when did your mom start? When was she start being a flight attendant? In the 80s, probably.
She's been there for like 27 years.
Okay, so she wasn't there. Since she's been there, it's always been deregulated. Airlines used to have a lot more regulation, and he deregulated, took government regulations off of it. That's what I'm saying, but like deregulation happened in the 70s.
Oh.
And this is pretty conservative, the deregulation stuff. In fact, Carter deregulated a lot of government, took away a lot of regulations. A couple things he did though that were unpopular inside Washington were the 3 martini lunch. It was kind of popular for senators and congressmen and lobbyists to go to lunch and kind of have long lunches and bill the government for their food and drinks and stuff, and he stopped that. And people inside Congress didn't love that, even in his own party, the 3 martini lunch. He was absurdly, I don't mean this to be insulting, he was absurdly moral. He said he cheated on his wife every day because every time he looks at a woman, he's cheating. He was probably the most religious man you ever had in office. He was Baptist. No, I'm saying he was really Baptist. his sister was like, if you ever do what?
Like Southern for Washington Baptist.
His sister tried to convert. What's his name? Started Hustler magazine. Larry Flint tried to convert Larry Flint to Christianity, and you should talk to Larry Flint all the time. And for a very small part, Larry Flint on his desk didn't go by Larry Flint. His nameplate said Jesus H. Christ on it.
That's really terrible.
But very, very, very religious family, very Southern Baptist. Probably, from what I had heard up until Obama, the only president since Eisenhower not to have had an affair on his wife, either in office or outside of office or before office. Yeah, I also, I also feel that if I ever heard that Michelle and Barack had not been faithful, I think it would shatter me. I think it would be so sad.
American people just feel, I just feel like they're like a priest.
They're the closest we've had to they're the closest we've had to people adoring that couple socially since John and Jackie. But that being said, it's different because so many Americans hate Barack Obama because he's race. They have a hard time getting past it, but they're also the youngest couple that we've had in there for a while too. The Clintons were younger, but women really had a hard time.
Hillary's really intense.
Like
Channeling,
do what?
connecting.
Connecting with Hillary Clinton. Yeah, she came off very prickly, and I don't think she is prickly, but she came off prickly, and Michelle Obama comes off much more warmly, right? During the campaign, Hillary Clinton said some stuff that was just politically really stupid, and she had to go back and apologize. She looked real political about it. And Michelle Obama has also had 2 younger children, and while Clinton's daughter, Chelsea Clinton, was in middle school when she got there, that's different than having a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old or something. It's been pretty cool. Like President Obama coached their basketball team, or like Little League basketball team. How much fun is that? And he was the assistant coach. So what if you're the coach and he's like, all right, I'm going to draw this play. You're like, I don't think so, Barack. We're going with my play. Carter is seen as a weak or failed presidency, though, because of his foreign policy. Let me give you some of the foreign policy good parts before we get to essentially what sunk Carter. Economically speaking, Carter left office with about the exact same unemployment rate as he found it. And inflation was bad when he got there, it was bad when he left. So economically speaking, Carter was kind of a wash. Foreign policy-wise, he did a couple things that were pretty amazing. One was the Camp David Accords. In even the mid-1970s, no Arabic country, no country in North Africa or the Middle East acknowledged Israel's right to exist. On their maps, it was just called occupied Palestinian territory. Right? And on most maps, it still says that, on most countries in the Middle East. In the 70s, the leader of Egypt was a guy named Anwar Sadat, who had actually fought, S-A-D-A-T, Sadat. Anwar Sadat had actually fought against Israel before, and he became president. And he was keen on maybe normalizing relations. And President Sadat, and the last name of I think it's Prime Minister was Begin at the time. Let me double check. Make sure I'm right. I'm not making up history. See, aren't you happy that I don't? Maybe I'm actually checking. President. Yeah.
Do you like not have these notes printed out to look from, or?
I sometimes do, sometimes don't. I have up there, but I just forgot to print them off, and most of the stuff I've
So, was Sadat like actually president, or was he just president?
No, he actually was. Well, he was president for Egypt. To say that he was democratically elected and there all the time like ours is probably not true. But he wasn't a dictator like Hosni Mubarak either. I mean, he was relatively democratically elected. And Menachem Begin, B-E-G-I-N, or B-E-G-E-N, was the Prime Minister of Israel. And Anwar Sadat actually went to Israel and he spoke at their parliament, their Congress, like ours, is called the Knesset. Knesset. First Arabic speaking person to go to the Knesset. And they met in Washington at Camp David. Do you know what Camp David is?
It's like
It's a retreat. It's not in Texas, it's in Maryland. It's like 20 miles outside of D.C. It's a presidential retreat. It's been there for a long time. It was named David after Eisenhower's grandkid. But presidents go there. It's sort of secluded in the woods. And he took Begin and Sadat and then came up with an agreement that the two countries would recognize each other. Israel recognized Egypt, and Egypt recognized Israel. And this is gigantic. This is the first time it's ever happened. The first positive step in Middle East peace. And Carter brokered this, and he was the one in between. Later, Carter would end up winning the Nobel Peace Prize for some of his humanitarian work after his presidency. Many people have said he's the best ex-president ever. Yeah, he's pretty important as an ex-president. If you go to the Carter Library in Atlanta, because I have a lot of family in Atlanta, I've gone there, you can actually see the signatures of Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin on the Camp David Accords right next to his Nobel Peace Prize, which is pretty awesome. He also did something with Panama. If you remember, when America took Panama, the canal itself was considered American territory. He actually gave Panama back the canal to be effective at the end of 1999. December 31st, 1999 was the last day of American ownership. A lot of conservatives were pissed about this because they thought that we were giving away American territory. Liberals were happy because we were recognizing Panama's sort of territorial integrity. So this is his foreign policy stuff that didn't get him lose him an election. Let's talk about what lost him an election.